Right, these notes are for the second day of adding and subtracting rational expressions. Most of the notes, or all of the notes that we've taken this semester have been guided notes, but like I said, this semester, some of them you're going to have to take independently and just take out notebook paper and write them as you go along with me. To make the video flow a little bit better, I've written the problems out ahead of time. If you had been in class, I would have written the problems out as we went. All right, for number 1 and 2, we're finding the least common multiple because we need to be able to do that successfully before we can add and subtract. So on number 1, there's nothing I can factor. So to find the least common multiple of the numbers, well, the least common multiple of 30 and 5, now think about multiples. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. So the least common one they have in common is 30. Now with the x's, they both have x's, so we definitely need an x. This one over here has 2, this one has 1, 2 is the most, so I'm going to take 2. They both have y, so we definitely need to have a y. This one has 1, this has 3, so the most is 3, so we have y cubed. That is our least common multiple. If they both have something, if they both have a variable, you take which one has the most. So if one has 1 and one has 4, you take 4. If one has 3 and one has 2, you take 3. So you take the most. But everything needs to be included. So if one had a z, so for example, if this one had a z and the other one didn't, well, this one on the left has 1 z and that has 0 z's. Well, one's more than 0, so we'd have to add the z. But we didn't have that there. All right, number 2. Number 2, to be able to figure out the least common multiple, everything has to be factored first. So this first one is a green light one, and it's not factored. So I'm going to go straight to my 2 parentheses, and the two numbers that multiply to negative 32 and add to negative 4 would be negative 8 and positive 4. So now, when I find my least common multiple, okay, this one has 1x minus 8, and that one has 0. Well, 1 is more than 0, so I'm going to have an x minus 8. This one has 1x plus 4, and this one has 1x plus 4. It's a tie. They both have 1, so I'm going to have 1x plus 4. And that's my least common multiple. All right. Now on your homework, and then again on the quiz, there's going to be a blank for you to tell me what the least common multiple is. Because if you don't identify it from the start, you're not going to be successful when you're working the problem. So on number 1, if I look at those denominators, they're not factorable, so I can't factor the denominators, but I can find the least common multiple just like we did in the first one. 5 and 20, the least common multiple would be 20. This first one has 2 x's, this has 1, so 2x is the most, so I need x squared. This is 1y and 1y, that's a tie, so I'm going to have 1y. Now looking at this fraction on the left, to get this bottom 5x squared y to match this, I'm going to have to multiply this equation by, or the fraction by 4 on the top and the bottom. To get 20xy to match 20x squared y, I have to multiply this fraction by an x. So when I do that, I'm going to get 12x over, and now my denominator's the least common multiple. That was my plan. And then 2xy, and on the bottom, I'm going to get 20x squared y. All right, now, because they have common denominators, I can add them together. On the top, I'm going to get 12x plus 2xy. When we do these problems, the denominator will always be factored when you get to the final answer. The numerator will not always be factored, so I need to see if it factors. Well, I can take out a greatest common factor of 2x, and that's going to leave me 12 divided by 2 is 6, the x's cancel, plus the 2's cancel, the x cancels, and I get y all over 20x squared y. Now there's no matching group to match the 6 plus y, but the 2 and the x, those are all outside of the parentheses. Those are individuals, those can be reduced. So the 2 and the 20 can reduce, and the x's can reduce. So now my final answer on top, all I have is 6 plus y, and because there's one group, these parentheses are optional. And on the bottom, it's 10xy, and that's my final answer. They won't always reduce, but sometimes they will. So you've got to continue to keep looking for it, even though it doesn't happen the majority of the time. Okay, number 2. first things first, I want to find the least common multiple. So they're not factorable because there's no plus or minus signs. So with the numbers 12 and 4, the least common multiple would be 12. Now this one has 1x, the one on the right has 0. 1 is more than 0, so I'm going to have 1x. They both have 1y, it's a tie, so it's 1y. So my fraction on the left, that is my least common multiple. I don't need to change it. But the one on the right, I need to change it. To be able to make it be 12xy, I need to multiply it by 3x. So my top is going to be 7x. The bottom is going to be 12xy. Minus over here, 5 times 3 is 15x, and on the bottom I'm going to have 12xy. Now that I have common denominators, now I can add them together. 7 minus 15 would give me 8x. Now, most of the time I can just stop after I've combined the two fractions, but sometimes they will reduce. This is one of those times. I don't have any matching groups, nothing factors because there's no plus or minuses, but 8 and 12 would reduce. I can divide them both by 4, and the x's could cancel out. So on the top I get 2, and on the bottom I have 3y, and that's my final answer. All right, let's try it again when we have some pluses and minuses. That seems to get a little stickier when we're working with those. So to determine my least common multiple, I have to have both denominators factored. Well, x plus 2 can't factor anymore, but this one can factor. X plus 2, x minus 1. Okay, so for the least common multiple, they both have an x plus 2. That's a tie. They each have 1, so we'll have a 1. This one on the right has 1x plus minus 1. The one on the left has zeros. Well, 1 is more than 0, so we need to have 1x minus 1. So the fraction on the left, it's already set up perfectly, but the fraction on the left, to make the denominators match, I'm going to need to multiply top and bottom by x minus 1. So when I do that, my denominator, again, is going to be the least common multiple. Once you get that least common multiple, then there's not going to be much to do with the denominators anymore. But the numerator, I've got to distribute the 6. So I'm going to have 6x minus 6. Plus, over here, I have 2x, and then x plus 2, x minus 1. So now that both fractions have the same denominator, now I can add them together. So I'm going to get x plus 2, x minus 1. On the top, I'm going to combine like terms. 6 and 2x is 4x minus 6. Now, on the top, I can factor that. I can take out a 2, and I'm going to be left with 2x, whoops, not plus, but minus 3. But 2x minus 3 is not going to reduce with any of those, so I can't reduce it anymore. There's my final answer. All right, last question. It's a minus, so the first thing I want to do is change this to a plus, and then change the sign of everything in the top numerator. I also need to factor my denominators to be able to figure out the least common multiple. So this is going to factor to x plus 6, x minus 4. So my least common multiple needs to include everything, so my least common multiple is going to be x plus 6, x minus 4. This fraction on the right, the denominator matches the least common multiple. I don't need to change it. But the fraction on the left, it's got the x minus 4. What it's missing is the x plus 6. So I need to multiply top and bottom by x plus 6. So my denominator is the least common multiple. And then in my numerator, I'm going to distribute. And that gives me 2x plus 12. Plus, over here, and it was plus because I changed it in the beginning, remember? X plus 6, x minus 4, and then the numerator is negative x minus 8. Now that the denominators match, now I can combine them into one fraction. So I have x plus 6, x minus 4, and on the top, 2x and negative x is x, 12 and negative 8 is 4. Now, this is a group, and if this was minus 4, you'd be in business. But because it's plus 4, they do not cancel out. So this is your final answer.